Jazz Malonda a direct message on the chat box so I can include you in the list. Only those who sent their names will be recognized to ask their questions. For those who are not comfortable asking their questions publicly or are experiencing internet connectivity problems, you may directly send your questions to me via the chat box and I will raise the question to the moderator. We are also creating a Viber group for this Kapihan for a more speedy dissemination of relevant documents from this event. If you wish to be added to the group, do send me a private message. Lastly, if you wish to be allowed to record the Kapihan, do let us know through the chat box. Thank you. Maraming salamat. We'll begin at exactly 9:30 a.m.
Ilang buwan na lang, eleksyon na naman. Pero dumarami pa rin ang mga nagkaka-COVID. Takot kang lumabas. Tingin mo hindi safe magparehistro. Don't worry. May solusyon.
Good morning, everyone. All right, can everyone see me? Ay, there. A beautiful morning to all our panelists, guests, and friends from the media. At sa lahat na rin ang nanonood sa atin ngayon sa Facebook Live, magandang umaga po. I am Joyce Ilas. I am the Information Specialist of Participate. And again, we welcome you all to Kapihan sa ASoG Ligtas Halalan 2022. On behalf of Participate, the Ateneo School of Government, LaSalle Institute of Government, NAMFREL, Ideals, Code NGO, and YouthLed, we welcome you to our event this morning. It's May 10, 2021. That means we are now officially less than a year away from the May 9, 2022 elections. And in less than a year, we will make one of the biggest decisions that we will have to make for our country. Desisyon na may malaking epekto rin sa pang-araw-araw nating buhay sa susunod na 6 na taon simula sa 2022. Kulang-kulang isang taon na nga lang, pero hanggang ngayon, patuloy pa rin ang pagdami ng mga nagkakaroon ng COVID-19 dito sa ating bansa. Kaya nga ang tanong ng marami sa atin ngayon, matutuloy pa ba ang 2022 elections? Ano-ano nga ba ang mga paghahandang ginagawa ng gobyerno para sa darating na halalan? Ligtas nga ba lumabas para magparehistro at para bumoto sa 2022? Iyon ang ilan sa mga tanong na sasagutin natin ngayong umaga dito sa Kapihan sa ASoG Ligtas Halalan 2022. And to open our Kapihan, may we call on the Dean of the Ateneo School of Government, Dean Ronald Mendoza.
Magandang umaga po sa lahat. Today, the countdown to May 9, 2022, our Philippine national elections begins. We now have less than 1 year to prepare for one of the most important democratic institutions in our country. Yet it is now becoming clearer that our country still faces severe pandemic risks, even from new COVID strains. This is on top of worsening political polarization and disinformation that plagues our political life as a democratic nation. The challenges and risks brought about by the pandemic will make the 2022 elections unlike any other election we have had. The government is no longer just facing the challenges of upholding a free and fair election. More importantly now, we all face the challenge of ensuring safe elections for Filipino voters so that turnout will be strong and the voice of the people will be heard. Recognizing the dangers brought about by the pandemic, more than 60 nations in the world decided to postpone their elections. This raises the risk of yet another false dichotomy that we need to choose between elections or our health and safety against COVID. We need not be forced into this dichotomy if we work with government and all our democratic stakeholders in preparing for the elections. There is evidence that it is possible to have both democratic elections and maintain safety. We can learn from the experiences of other countries like Indonesia, Singapore, and the United States. These countries have all held successful and safe elections under the pandemic. Even our own COMELEC has successfully organized and held the Palawan plebiscite under pandemic. Still, we know that only 60% of our kababayans in Palawan turned out for their plebiscite. The normal turnout for our elections is about 80%. We can do better, we can prepare well, but there is not much time left. Today, we will discuss how the government and the electorate can work together to protect our people from pandemic while they cast their vote. Government needs to do its part, but we citizens and stakeholders must do our part too. We collectively need to COVID-proof our elections and send a signal of preparedness and confidence so that all our people will participate. Our initiative today responds to this. Participate is a non-partisan pro-democracy coalition dedicated to engage and empower the political participation of the Filipino people in their democracy. In collaboration with partners in government, and notably COMELEC, we will launch our report on international evidence and best practices on COVID-proofing elections today. We will also publish a unity statement in solidarity with COMELEC and democratic stakeholders to support our preparations for the 2022 elections. Maraming salamat po at mag-ingat po tayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Dean. May sinabi si Dean kanina. Sabi niya, there is a need to COVID-proof the elections. By COVID-proof, we mean make the elections safe, free, and fair for all. Ligtas, patas, at malaya para sa ating lahat. We'll discuss that more on later. But before we begin our discussion, just some quick reminders for our guests and especially friends from the media. Now, for those who wish to ask their questions, kindly send a direct message to our host, Jazz Malonda, so he can include you in the list, because only those who sent their names will be recognized to ask their questions. Now, we also created a Viber group for this Kapihan for a more speedy dissemination of relevant documents from this event. Now, if you wish to be added to that group, just do send Jazz a message also. Now, para sa lahat naman ng nakatutok ngayon sa atin sa Facebook Live, inaanyayahan din namin kayo para sumali sa diskusyon. Mag-iwan lang ng komento, suhestyon, opinyon, kung ano ang gusto nyong sabihin, ipaalam nyo lang sa amin, mag-iwan kayo ng inyong mensahe sa comment box sa Facebook Live streaming. Inaanyayahan din namin kayo na i-share at i-post ang ating kapihan sa Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at iba pang social media sites. At huwag kalilimutan gamitin ang hashtag Ligtas Halalan 2022. Again, hashtag Ligtas Halalan 2022. Now, to start our discussion, let us introduce our panelists. Now, our first guest is the head of the New Normal Committee in COMELEC. Mahalagang committee yan sa COMELEC ngayon. Let us welcome COMELEC Commissioner Antonio Co. Jr. Good morning, sir. All right. And then, yes. And then let's go to our next guest, one that is also very familiar to all of us. We often see her giving us the most important health bulletin for the day. She is the Department of Health's Health Promotion and Communication Director. Let us all welcome Dr. Beverly Ho. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you
All
for
right.
having us.
Okay, now also with us today is a professor and the former dean of the National College of Public Administration and Governance of the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She also serves as director of UP CIFAL Philippines. She's also the electoral oversight and reform specialist of Participate. Please welcome Dr. Edna Ko. All right, good morning, ma'am. Okay. I think her tech, please, the audio of Dr. Edna. All right.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Joyce.
All right. Our next guest is the Secretary General of the National Citizens Movement for Free Elections. Sila ang unang-unang election watchdog NGO in the world. So everyone, please welcome Mr. Eric Alvia. All right. Good morning, Sir Eric. All right. Also with us today is the Executive Director of the Legal Network for Truthful Elections, or LENTE. So please welcome election advocate, Attorney Rona Ann Caritos. All right, good morning, ma'am. Now, up next is the Executive Director of the Makati Business Club. Also a very familiar face because he was formerly ABS-CBN News Channel's business news head and news anchor. Let us welcome Mr. Coco Alcoaz. Good morning, Sir Coco. And
good morning, everybody. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Ron.
All right, and last but definitely not the least, the representative of the youth, ang boses ng kabataan sa diskusyon ngayong araw. She is the Program Officer of Youth Leadership for Democracy, or YouthLed. Let us welcome Attorney Mildred Ople. Good morning, Attorney.
Magandang Lunes ng umaga sa ating lahat, and salamat sa ASoG sa pag-organize nito at sa pagbibigay ng boses sa mga kabataan sa araw na ito.
All right. So aside from our panelists, we also have some special guests joining us in the audience today. We have COMELEC spokesman James Jimenez, and I also see in our participants former COMELEC Commissioner Louis Gia. Now, I would also like to acknowledge the presence of our consortium partners. We have NAMFREL, Ideals, Code NGO, and the LaSalle Institute of Government. Now, bigatin ang mga guests natin, hindi ba ngayong araw na to? Kaya mukhang magiging malaman talaga ang usapan natin ngayong araw. Kaya hindi na natin patatagalin pa, umpisahan na natin ang usapan. So to start our discussion, let's call on Dr. Edna Ko to read a unity statement supported by more than 2,000 groups from different sectors. Kasama na dito yung academe, civic groups, youth groups, women's groups, business groups, at pati mga religious groups at iba pa. But before you read the statement, ma'am, can you give us an idea, saan po ba nanggaling ang unity statement na ito at tungkol po ba saan ito?
Salamat sa pagtatanong mo, Joyce. Gusto kong sabihin na itong statement na ating babasahin ngayon ay hindi nanggaling sa thin air, hindi galing sa hangin. Ang ating statement ay sinimulang pag-aralan, kalapin ang participate group, at patuloy na pinag-aaralan ang Philippine elections at ang iba pang democratic exercise natin, lalong-lalo na ngayong panahon ito ito ng pandemya. So ano ang pinagsimulan nito? Ito po ay galing sa iba't ibang karanasan ng mga bansa na nagsagawa na ng eleksyon sa panahon at sa gitna ng pandemic. Ito ay nanggaling din sa isang mahusay na dokumentasyon na batay sa obserbasyon ng participate group sa Palawan plebiscite noong nakaraang Marso. Ito ay nagbuhat din sa iba't ibang mungkahi ng ating legislators, lawmakers, sa pakikinig namin sa iba-ibang sesyon, discussion sa legislative hinggil sa usapin ng eleksyon sa iba't ibang panig ng bansa. At ito ay bunga rin ng patuloy na pakikinig sa iba-ibang sektor sa pamamagitan ng webinar na idinaos. Iba-ibang sektor ang nagsabi ng kanilang concern, tanong, fears kaugnay ng election at participation, at mula din sa ating health authorities. Saan ito papunta? Ang statement po ay isa naming indikasyon ng support para sa ating electoral management body, ang Commission on Election, para bigyan ng malakas na suporta ang COMELEC at ang ilang democratic groups and stakeholders na ipagpatuloy ang ating eleksyon sa gitna ng pandemic. With this, Joyce, may I now have the pleasure to read our unity statement.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead po. You may read the unity statement. And just to remind everyone, this unity statement is being supported by more than, as of now, supported and signed by more than 2,000 groups. Iba't ibang klaseng grupo to sa buong bansa. So yes, go ahead, ma'am. You may read the unity statement po.
The title of the statement is Make the 2022 Election Safe, Fair, and Free for All. We, the academe, civil society organizations, youth groups, and sectoral leaders call on the national government, Congress, and the electoral stakeholders to COVID-proof the 2022 elections. COVID-proof means ensuring that the elections are safe, fair, and free for all Filipino voters. 1 year from now, the 2022 national and local elections will put the integrity of Philippine democracy to a test. The government certainly puts efforts to address the coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 pandemic. However, these efforts may not be enough to fully surmount the health crisis as the virus continues to pose a threat to many public activities, including the upcoming elections. Lessons from the recently concluded Palawan plebiscite and from several countries that recently held their elections showed us that it is possible to successfully hold democratic processes amidst the pandemic. We believe that it can be done as long as the electoral management body, the Commission on Elections, is given enough support and resources, including budget and assistance to implement effective health and safety policies. Alongside these measures, a multi-stakeholder approach could also support COMELEC, including extensive information and awareness initiatives and protocols to ensure safe and fair political campaigns. We further call for specific measures such as 1. Ensuring that the COMELEC receives enough funds to overcome the fear and uncertainty of voting. An additional allocation of about 10 billion pesos is needed to implement measures that will protect citizens and create an environment of safe, secure, and credible elections. This estimate is based on international best practices and the estimated additional cost the government needed to ensure the safe conduct of the Palawan plebiscite in March 2021. 2. Protecting voters from COVID-19 and politicking. Stricter measures should be implemented from the start of the election period to voting day. The Philippines can learn from the best practices of countries that successfully held their elections amid the pandemic, such as Indonesia, Singapore, and the United States. There is need to curb the expected rise in vote buying due to the country's economic conditions. It will also be critical not to politicize impending access to vaccines by making them fairly available to all based on identified needs and criteria. Responsive, prompt, and efficient distribution of financial aid will also help reduce politicizing social development and consequently the elections. Third, implementing an extensive information and awareness campaign on safety. To instill confidence among voters, there is need to establish an atmosphere of safety and trust in health protocols. It is critical to provide accessible and reliable information on the safety measures done to prepare for election day and to form effective campaigns against disinformation and misinformation that may cause fear and concern among voters. 4. Promoting safe and fair new normal campaigning. There is a need to ensure that political campaigns are safe and fair, that spending is transparent, and that candidates are accountable for their actions. Fifth, adopting a multi-stakeholder approach to ensure transparency. Election stakeholders, such as civil society organizations, other government agencies, the academia, the youth, and other sectors could be effective partners in developing and implementing appropriate policy measures and regulations for the elections. Transparency and cooperation can build the legitimacy of this important democratic exercise. Finally, we pledge to support COMELEC and other democratic stakeholders to consistently implement protocols that will ensure the success of the May 22 elections. And we invite the more than 50 million voting population in the Philippines to join us in our call for a safe, fair, and free democratic exercise. Mabuhay po at magandang umaga sa ating lahat.
Okay, thank you very much, Dean Edna. At gaya nga po na sabi natin kanina, itong statement na to, unity statement na to, ay sinusuportahan na ng mahigit 2,000 grupo. Pero simula ngayong araw na to, ay we will make this unity statement available to everyone, to the public who also wants to support the call to make the call to make the 2022 elections COVID-proof or safe, fair, and free. Tama po, Doc Edna?
Tama yan, Joyce. At yung ibang hindi pa nakakapirma bilang indikasyon ng kanilang pagsuporta sa ating unity statement ay maaari pa ring humabol dahil ang statement na ito ay nakalagay sa Facebook page ng Ateneo de Manila, the School of Government particularly. Hanapin lang po natin yon, pumirma at ilagay ang ating pangalan at ang ating pakikiisa dito sa unity statement. Salamat, Joyce.
We will also, thank you, ma'am. We will also make this available sa Facebook page din ng Participate. So, hanapin lang natin sa Facebook, Participate Facebook page. At dahil nga binanggit ni Dean Edna na sa statement kanina na isa nga sa basehan ng unity statement ay para gawing COVID-proof ang election ay ang plebiscite na ginawa sa Palawan nitong Marso lang. Para sa mga hindi nakakaalam, nagkaroon nga ng eleksyon sa Palawan kahit na may pandemya ngayon. At ayon nga sa COMELEC, generally safe ang naging plebiscite kahit na meron niyang COVID-19. Dahil dyan, I wish to call on Sir Eric Alvia of NAMFREL. Kasi yung NAMFREL was in Palawan last March for the plebiscite. Sir Eric? Yes, sir, based on your observation sa Palawan, what do you think was the most important lesson learned from the Palawan plebiscite insofar as making an election safe is concerned? And ano ba, sir, yung lessons mula sa Palawan na pwede nating i-adopt para sa 2022 elections?
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Joyce. Yes, just last month, a month and a half ago, we had the plebiscite in Palawan to decide on apportioning the province into 3 sub-provinces. Nakita mo na natin na maraming agam-agam sa pagpapatakbo ng plebisitong to dahil nasa pandemya. But we were, COMELEC did a good job in rising to the challenge by preparing properly and by involving the community in their preparations towards making sure that the plebiscite would be run in a safe manner by observing also public health safety standards, the minimum public health safety standards. We realize also that because of these special preparations, there are some logistical concerns that have to be addressed prior, in fact, a few months prior to the plebiscite. And this was addressed, albeit a limited budget, but this was addressed. And we've seen also that there are innovations that were introduced in running the plebiscite. Primarily, it's putting up of independent polling precincts wherein the voters are screened prior to entering the voting center. We also saw that there were some concerns with regards also to campaigning, because people have been moving around the area, but at least the local governments also were able to enforce the minimum public health safety standards in running a campaign for the issues. So those are the primary learnings from the plebiscite in Palawan. So it's possible, it's been done, and we've seen that it's relatively a fairly high turnout for the elections.
Yes, sir. And that gives us confidence na posible pala magkaroon ng eleksyon sa gitna ng pandemya. And it can be done very safely. Isa pa po sa mga nasa Palawan din itong nakaraang Marso ay ang Lente. Kaya nga ang tanong naman natin ngayon kay Attorney Ona ng Lente, ma'am, 60% daw ang voter turnout sa Palawan plebiscite. Mas mataas ito kaysa sa inaasahan para sa Palawan, pero mas mababa ito sa kung ikukumpara natin sa voter turnout ng regular election naman. Base po sa naobserbahan nyo sa Palawan, paano ba natin mas makukumbinsi pa yung mga kababayan natin para lumabas? Una, para lumabas ngayon, magparehistro, at eventually para po lumabas at bumoto sa May 2022.
Hi, good morning Joyce. Good morning po sa lahat ng mga nanonood ng webinar na to. Una, we have to nuance the question, Joyce, because we cannot compare the plebiscite to an election. Kasi iba ang turnout talaga pag election, iba ang turnout pag plebiscite. And surprisingly actually, and it was really surprise good turnout. Expected lang naman ng COMELEC for the Palawan plebiscite was 40%. But the Palaweños came out to vote and they were able to register 60% voter turnout. And that's a very good turnout because considering that it was during a pandemic or still in a pandemic and people came out, the Palaweños came out to vote. And going back to your question, probably what were the reasons why Palaweños voted, why they went out? One is, kailangan nating tandaan that the plebiscite was supposed to happen a year ago, but it was postponed because of the plebiscite. So isang taon na, actually 2 taon na nga nangangampanya yung dalawang grupo primarily for the plebiscite or against the plebiscite. So nakatulong yung prolonged campaign of the two groups as to the conduct and as to the Palawan plebiscite. Second, malaking tulong din yung mga protocols na ginawa ng COMELEC, yung mga bagong protocols to ensure the safety of not only the voters but all the stakeholders for the conduct of the plebiscite, pre-plebiscite, and on the plebiscite day itself. So it was the protocols implemented by COMELEC made Palaweños more confident in going out and registering and voting for the Palawan plebiscite.
Thank you. And you mentioned nga na malaking source of confidence sa mga Palaweños yung mga protocols na in-implement ng COMELEC. So on that note, let us call on our representative from COMELEC. We want to hear from the people behind the plebiscite and of course, the May 9, 2022 elections. So may I ask Commissioner Ko, please? Yes, sir. Good morning po.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Sir, napakinggan natin kanina yung unity statement, panawagan po ng libo-libo nating mga kababayan. Kabilang na dito yung pagtataas po ng budget ng COMELEC para sa mga nararapat na safety and health measures, ang pagtutulong-tulong ng iba't ibang mga sektor ng ating gobyerno, ensuring that our elections is safe from not just COVID-19 but also from politicking. Sir, ano pong masasabi nyo dito sa unity statement?
Yes, maganda yung unity statement na binanggit ni Ms. Dr. Edna Ko. In fact, COMELEC welcome this statement and look forward to work with sectors who are stakeholders in this election. Welcome, napakalaking tulong sa amin yan. We welcome it. Hopefully, we can work together under the whole of nation approach natin dito. How to make a successful election come 2022 COVID-proof.
Sir, every 3 years po, COMELEC prepares for an election. So sanay na ang COMELEC dyan sa paghahanda na yan. But what is new this year is that we are holding an election in the middle of a pandemic. So bilang new normal committee chief, sir, tell us about the preparations of COMELEC po. Ano na po bang paghahandang ginagawa natin to ensure that our 2022 elections is COVID-proof, safe, fair, and free, sir?
Okay. Ganito, under normal situation, every 3 years, before on the second year, 2 years before the election, we formed what is known as the steering committee. Now, in steering committee within COMELEC is the one that takes charge for the preparation for the election. Now, for the 2022 election, because of the COVID situation, COMELEC decided to form or constitute what is known as the New Normal Committee. The New Normal Committee, principal duty or obligation or function nito is to come up with what do you call this, measures that could address the pandemic for the 2022 election. So, kung napansin ninyo, nabanggit na rin kanina yung Palawan plebiscite. There were challenges, talagang grabing challenges diyan sa Palawan plebiscite na yan. And it was in effect a laboratory for us. Kung pwedeng magkaroon ng isang safe and secure and a participatory election for our citizens. Na-discover din namin na because of the coordinated coordinated cooperation between the local government, the citizenry, the COMELEC, naging successful yung ating plebisito. We implemented several anti-COVID measures, no, safety measures dito from the start of the registration, pagpasok ng mga ng mga botante sa mga polling places natin, kinunan sila ng mga temperature. Those who are exceeding 37 were brought to a what we call the isolated polling place. So lahat yan, no? This, we believe, gave confidence to our voters to go and troop to the polling place and cast their votes. So yun ang aming gusto sanang maulit dito sa 2022 election. However, there are certain challenges, alin naman. Dun sa Palawan plebiscite kasi, it's a manual election. No? It's a manual election. Dito sa 2022 election, it's this would be an automated one. So iba yan, no? Pangalawa, medyo relatively konti ang mga botante natin sa Palawan compared dito sa national election na darating, no? So these are challenges that we are facing, and I would like to assure everyone that COMELEC is prepared. COMELEC is prepared to deliver an honest and free and safe election come 2022, and we promise to deliver that election.
So tuloy na tuloy, sir. Walang makakapigil.
Tuloy tayo sa 2022 election.
Mm-hmm. Sir, huling tanong na mula sa akin kasi I'm sure marami pang tanong yung mga kaibigan natin sa media mamaya. Nabanggit kanina kasi sir na pag-usapan natin yung voter turnout. Parang recently si Commissioner Guanzon sinabi niya na she expects the voter turnout for 2022 to be slightly lower po considering what happened in the Palawan plebiscite. So sir, no 2016 I think we have 80%, 2019 75% voter turnout. Sa 2022 sir, ano po ba ang voter turnout na ine-expect ng COMELEC?
Okay, let's go back first to sa Palawan plebiscite, no. The Palawan plebiscite, because of the COVID situation at that time, including during the time, we were expecting a lower turnout, but we were really surprised. We were really surprised to hit around 60 to 61% voters participation. It's a good sign, meaning if we can assure the people that it would be safe to go to the polls, they will come. Another thing, interesado din yung mga tao doon sa Palawan because the issue submitted to them is something which is consequential to the province of Palawan. So they want to register their vote. They want to say whether they agree or disagree do sa partition of Palawan. So that issue, as well as probably the assurance that it would be safe, drove people to go to the polls. Okay, let's now go to the 2022 election. This 2022 election is one of the most consequential elections that will happen to us in recent times. No? So I expect people to troop again to the polls as long as we can provide to them a safe and we can guarantee a safe election. And we promise to do that. No, we expect and help from the national government, from the NGOs, para mangyari lang itong safe election na to. And hopefully we can deliver that promise.
Sir, do we have an estimate voter turnout? Ano po ang target natin for 2022?
Okay, well, we don't want to, pasensya na, we don't want to put a target on this. Alam niyo naman, very, very fluid pa yung situation natin. Hopefully, hopefully the government can achieve its target of probably, sabi nila latest, it would be 50% vaccination rate by the end of the year, or it would be up to the first quarter of next year. So hopefully kung wala na masyadong variants dyan that will develop, hopefully we can reach a respectful percentage of voter turnout.
Can we beat the 2016 record of 80%?
Ganito. It is a presidential election, no? It is a presidential election. Compared to a local election or midterm election, mas mababa talaga yung midterms. So presidential election, and ngayon pa lang medyo marami na tayong naririnig na mga interesado dyan na gusto tumakbo. So I think it would drive people to go to vote. Hopefully, yan ang expectation namin.
Alright, thank you very much, sir. Babalikan po namin kayo mamaya. I for sure may tanong yung mga kasamahan natin sa media. Binanggit ni Commissioner kanina yung vaccination. So puntahan naman natin ang isa sa mga punong abala sa pagsugpo nitong pandemyang ito, ang DOH. So may we call on Dr. Beverly. Yes, ma'am, the Philippines is known to have a very festive election season. Kapag election na filing ng COCs pa lang, parang piyesta na palagi sa labas ng COMELEC. Yung sorties, parang palaging may concerts, mga meeting de avance, ganyan. But now, in the middle of this pandemic, events like these can turn into super spreader events. From the perspective, ma'am, of the health sector, what do we need to do to ensure that the 2020 elections is safe?
Thank you for your question. This is a very interesting session that we have. There are a few things that I think we need to think about. First is that everyone, all the stakeholders from the election authorities, national and local governments, even civil society organizations, and the citizen, we all have to accept that this will be a different form of an election, diba? Because of the context that we're in. And we need to acknowledge that, prepare for it, and then also own the solutions, and not just really just wait for one party or two parties to really think about how we will do it. Second important point to make is that I think over the course of the entire year, we have all learned about the basic principles of how the prevention measures are to be undertaken. However, sometimes the PPEs, when we look at people wearing the PPEs and the behavior of the people, we look at that as sort of like the top priority in terms of preventive measures. But the reality is, the studies continuously show that in the hierarchy of protection, it's the engineering and the administrative controls that are really more effective. No, you can only do so much if people have already gathered in crowds. You can only do so much if everyone is already siksikan in the area, diba? And that's why it's important for us to have mechanisms to make sure na maybe there's a schedule, diba? People can only go to a certain area from this time to this time. Parang may, those are what we call engineering or administrative controls, no? Making sure that it's just not related to the individual behavior and the wearing of PPEs. Related to that also is emphasizing certain priorities over the others. So for example, last year we gave equal importance to, say, mask wearing, hand washing, etc. But as more information comes out now, it's very clear that ventilation plays a very big role. So if this is the case, are there certain areas that have been previously tagged as possible voting sites? Could we now move to other areas na mas open air, diba? And then just also related to these 2 points is that really recognizing that enforcement can have limitations, no? If we've not done our engineering and administrative controls well enough, then even if you have a whole swath of people trying to do the enforcement, mahihirapan pa rin tayo, no? So it all goes hand in hand. And then just a few more things. Since we know that we won't be able to do a lot of these on-the-ground activities, then a lot of the candidates will likely vie for airtime, no? Media coverage. And seeing the many activities that we have been doing the past year. Dito, no, medyo malaking challenge ito. How to make sure that there's really no crowding in the coverage of certain events. And I think the different media outfits can actually think of a better way or a more efficient way to do this, because as it is really happening now in all of the national government activities, we did have cases, no, that sprung from, coverage because ang sikip in the coverage area. Perhaps also something that we can, our civil societies can continuously push for is the full implementation of the EO that was signed last February, which will hopefully trigger better internet access in far-flung areas, because you might want to consider this as a mechanism when candidates actually shift out of the typical practices that they have. So I guess finally it's really just emphasizing that this takes joint responsibility, and like in some cases of what happened, parang breaches in MPHS, diba, by some officials, or jumping the line in vaccines. Nakita natin, no, that when the public is engaged, when the public is sufficiently educated about the issues, they themselves are able to raise these violations to hold the people in power accountable. So I think dapat ganon din, no, for the election period. When people know that these activities put others at risk, they themselves will demand that the candidates shift out of these high-risk activities. Thank you.
Although, ma'am, kasi parang nasa kultura na nating mga Pilipino na di ba, pagkampanya, para talagang may concert yan, merong stage, tapos maraming mga tao, may mga artista pa nga minsan, tapos yung mga kandidato pa yung kumakanta, sumasayaw. It's a very fun, festive event na, ayun, I would say bahagi na ng kultura natin, kasi yun yung nakikita natin from the 60s, I believe. From the perspective of the health sector, ma'am, would you advise the government, or would you advise COMELEC to allow these forms of campaigning to still be done, or dapat ba bawasan talaga natin?
I think what is clear to us is that a lot can change depending on how much uptake or how successful our rollout of the vaccines will be in the coming months. But I'm pretty sure that it also won't be the same across the country, diba? So maybe some areas will have, higher vaccine coverage, significantly higher coverage, and there will be probably some sort of a more flexible engagement for them, diba? Pero as of this time, if we're talking theoretical, na nandito tayo sa stage na to, well, that's something that we won't really recommend as of this time.
Ma'am, you mentioned the vaccination program. Last na po mula sa akin. How is the vaccination program of the government so far? Can we reach the target herd immunity rate po na 70 million? I think, tama po ba? 70%, 70 million by the end of the year. Bago po, at least bago mag-campaign period.
So that's the objective, diba, of the program. Lahat naman tayo gusto natin yun maabot, no? So perhaps two main things that will be a challenge to that will be, will the supplies arrive on time? And that's something that's not really within our control, diba? Kita niyo naman, no? All the data is showing how much other countries, higher income countries, have already been able to book those vaccine stocks. But so far, the projections, if they really, if the companies will be able to deliver, we're confident that they're going to be here. So the next challenge is really to make sure that the people will show up to the vaccination sites. And for that, I'm here once again asking for help of our civil society partners and the private sector who've already helped us out the last few months. Pero kulang pa, no? We need to do better to convince more people, families, friends to get themselves vaccinated. Really show up, not just for their first dose, but also for their second dose. So, nandun tayo. The vaccines are arriving, and we just need to make sure we all do get our shots.
Mm-hmm. And we're still optimistic that we can get this herd immunity. We can get 70 million vaccinated by the end of 2021.
we cannot not be optimistic. This is for our country.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. I'm sure maraming tanong pa ibang mga kasamahan natin sa media mamaya. Pero ngayong pandemya kasi, isa sa mga grupo na talagang naapektuhan, pero nagkaroon pa rin ng napakalaking kontribusyon sa pagtulong sa ating mga kababayan ay ang business sector. So at this point, tawagin naman natin si Mr. Coco Alcoaz ng Makati Business Club. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Joyce.
Good morning. Coco, after everything that we have heard so far, we want to know, with what's happening now, with what we heard from the COMELEC and the DOH, meron bang mga apprehensions ang business sector? What are your biggest apprehensions in the conduct of the 2022 elections?
First of all, thanks, Joyce, Dean Ron, Dean Edna, Commissioner Ko, Doc Bev, Eric. Thank you very much for organizing this and for speaking here today. Apprehensions, first of all, I think the most important thing is that we think, there are ways to safely reopen the economy, and there are ways to conduct a safe, free, and fair election. I think that's the main message that we would have. Of course, there's a way to conduct that election that will be unsafe, unfree, and unfair. But I think if we put all our minds to it, and our efforts, and Doc Bev has talked about what's going on the health side, particularly vaccination right now. If we put our minds to it, there is a way to conduct it, and it's very important, Joyce. And if you allow me a little time here, the business sector is really very focused on reviving jobs, livelihood, business, and the economy. We know how badly our economy has been hurt. Vaccines and herd immunity can help. Many in the business sector are helping people like Doc Bev as much as they can to try to fix the vaccination systems, both at the national and the LGU levels. But the other thing that can help the economy, aside from vaccines, is a safe and free election. That's because, to create jobs, you need to attract investment. And you need investment from businesses that are already here or new investment, whether this is foreign investment or the entrepreneur that's here. You get more of that when the country is stable and moving forward, both of which are highly connected to fair and free elections. Fair and free elections produce a government that has a mandate, support, goodwill, even a honeymoon. A government with these and a plan and the will, they can enact and implement policies that will give businessmen the confidence they need to create jobs, Joyce.
Sir, the business sector has been playing a very significant role in helping our countrymen during the pandemic. So, sir, do you see yourself also playing a major role again in ensuring the safety of the 2022 elections?
Yeah, MBC and other business groups have always been very active, either as associations, sometimes as companies, and certainly as executives in these countries' elections over many decades, Joyce. So we expect that to continue. There are many private sector initiatives already that are happening right now. I see former Commissioner Louis here and Louis Gia, and he's involved in one of these projects that we're partly involved in. There are many activities like that, or projects and initiatives like that. We expect to be very involved here. We consider this very important. As I said, just as we're trying very hard to safely reopen the economy in terms of the right health protocols and vaccination, there are ways to conduct a safe, free, and fair election, and we are invested in doing our share to make that happen, Joyce.
Voter education, sir, that's right. Tama po. Voter education initiatives, awareness.
I think if you talk to Louis Gia later on, he'll talk about registration as well, that we're partly involved in. I understand there are some issues there. If we have more time, we can talk about that. But yes, all of that whole range, Joyce, of issues, you'll find business executives in all those places.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Coco. Isa pang sektor na talagang napaka-aktibo ngayon sa social media sa pagpapaabot ng kanilang nararamdaman hinggil nga sa eleksyon at sa pandemya ay ang youth sector. So at this point, let us hear from Attorney Mildred Ople of YouthLed. So Attorney Dred, mula naman sa sektor ng kabataan, ano naman ang mga ano sa tingin mo ang pinakamalaking kontribusyon ng mga kabataan ngayong darating na halalan?
Maraming salamat, Joy, sa katanungan mo. I think the biggest contribution of the young people this 2022 elections is they're one of the driving force not only during the registration but during the election day itself. So we hope that in the 2022 elections, unlike the 2016 and 2019 election where we see a slight decline in the participation of the young people, from about 33% in 2016 and in 2019 about 31%. So we hope to increase that number in 2022 elections. That's why over the weekend, actually starting Friday, there are various launches being held by different groups, and we are glad that a lot of youth organizations, not just in the main cities or key cities nationwide, are participating, but as far as the island provinces, they're all there to support the launches, to reach out to as many young people as possible. So they will be a driving force in information dissemination and eventual participation in the actual conduct of the election day. Right.
Mhm. Meron bang mga pangamba ang kabataan natin ngayon hinggil naman sa pagpaparehistro o pati sa ano na rin, sa conduct ng 2022 elections?
Based on our consultations with the young people, one of the biggest concern or apprehension of the young people nowadays are ito talaga yon. Will their vote actually matters? Lalo na isa lang naman sila, or but it won't make any difference. And they are also busy with other activities like the online classes or the modules that they're doing. We've talked to a lot of young people during our time and motion study to check on the observations on registration. So that's one. The young professionals are doing work from home, and a lot of the out-of-school youth and the vulnerable sectors are also helping out their respective families to survive this pandemic. So kumbaga, parang secondary na lang on their mind, their participation with the election. So that's what we hope to also change and to address their concern. And what is more effective than a fellow young leader or a fellow youth convincing a fellow young person to actually participate in the election. That's why, ayan, ang dami nating ginagawang efforts together with different groups participating in the voters registration and education initiatives. So we're glad to be helping out and supporting this very important call for the young people to register and vote. And as far as registration is concerned, during our time and motion study we conducted prior to the implementation of this new quarantine levels, there are three issues that the young people are actually facing in terms of registration. One is access, the second one is the process, and the third one, of course, is motivation to go out and actually register. So first is access. So unlike before that the access to the registration forms of COMELEC is very limited, sa COMELEC office mo lang talaga makukuha. Ngayon, there's a lot of access na pwede nating pagkuhanan ng registration form ng COMELEC through the iRehistro portal, which is a very innovative way of convincing young people na madali na mag-fill up ng form. So you don't have to do it manually or in triplicate. And pwede rin i-download nila mismo yung form in the COMELEC website. So there are various ways para mapadali yung pagpaparehistro nila. In terms of process naman, and because of the challenges of the pandemic, the COMELEC is also facing a lot of difficulties kasi skeletal lang yung workforce nila. So limited lang din yung personnel nila who are going to their respective offices. And the registration days are shortened. So unlike before na Monday to Friday, including Saturdays nga and holidays, ngayon hanggang Thursdays na lang to give way to the disinfection every Friday. So the access to the COMELEC offices really is one of the concerns. And yung process naman, if you go there manually to fill up the form, it will take you about 20 to 30 minutes. But if you use the iRehistro or you have a ready form filled out already, but not signed, of course, you have to sign it in front of the COMELEC election officer as required by the law. So napapabilis yung proseso, nababawasan siya ng kalahati, like 5 to 10 minutes na lang. And motivation is the last issue of the young people. So yung motivation, katulad na nabanggit ko, kasi busy nga sila sa online classes nila or sa work nila or helping out in their family. So I think there are a lot of ways to convince them and to motivate them. One is that the teachers are very helpful. They use it to incentivize their students, lalo na yung mga estudyante ng Araling Panlipunan. So last year, we've seen it in the social media na lahat talaga ng mga estudyante niya na require niya to register. So that's one way of also motivating them, and that drives also the registration in the COMELEC offices. So we hope na all of these efforts will help out, increase the registration numbers. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you, Attorney Dred. So gaya nga ng sinabi namin sa Unity Statement, naniniwala kami na to make our 2022 elections COVID-proof o safe, fair, and free o ligtas, patas, at malaya, kailangan ng multi-stakeholder approach. Kaya pinakinggan natin ang COMELEC, ang DOH, ang pribadong sektor, ang business sector, at ang youth sector din. Ngayon naman, at this point, tatanggap na tayo ng questions mula sa mga kaibigan natin sa media na nandito rin. Kasama natin sa Kapihan ng ngayong umaga. So let us start with, may I call on the representative of TV5, Jen Calimon. Jen? All right, si Jen ba is here? All right, so if Jen is not yet here, let's call on another reporter. May we call on Ina Reformina of ABS-CBN. Are they here? All right. Okay. Nagpadala na lang ng question si Ms. Ina Reformina of ABS-CBN, unless we have her right now. Ina?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Morning, Ina.
Yes, I think I posted my question, but I'd like to read. Can you hear me, Joyce?
Yes. Go, Ina. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Nagpadala
na lang ng question si Ms. Ina Reformina of ABS-CBN, unless we have her right now. Ina?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Morning, Ina.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I think I posted my question, but I'd like to read. Can you hear me, Joy?
I think we're having technical difficulty. Ina, can you hear me? We can see her on the screen right now. Ina?
Yes, Joyce?
Yes, go ahead. You can ask your question.
My first question is for Commissioner Ko. Good morning, Commissioner. Actually, I posted my questions, but I'd like to read them na lang. So first of all, sir, can you please give us a picture of the safety protocols that we will be adopting in the upcoming elections, of course, in light of the pandemic, just to give the public an idea of how the elections will be conducted, lalo na yung hindi po familiar sa nangyari dun sa Palawan plebiscite, ano yung pagdadaanan nila, ano yung mga proseso in terms of safety protocols. Also, sir, second to that is where are we in our election timeline? In terms of our preparations, I know that every time we have elections, we have timelines. So where are we now in our preparations? And lastly, po, sir, also, how will the campaigns be conducted? Can you also give us an idea of the guidelines that will later on be released by the COMELEC? Thank you.
Okay, good morning, Ina. Thank you for the question. Okay, dun muna tayo sa election safety protocols. No? Presently, COMELEC is in the midst of discussion on how to implement safety measures for the 2022 election. In fact, in a few weeks, we'll be conducting a 3-in-1 seminar among COMELEC officials. Gagawa kami ng manual, which we call a new normal manual. The manual will now state the guidelines on how election will be conducted in COVID situation. No? Internally, how we prepare our ballots, how we register, how we transport ballots, lahat yan, up to the time of the election. Kasama na rin ang campaign rules dyan. So hopefully we can draft this manual by the end of the month or until next month, and for the approval of the NBank. That will be our guide on how election will be conducted. Now, yung Palawan plebiscite namin would have a really a significant effect on how the new normal manual will be drafted, finally drafted. No? Just to explain to everyone what happened during the Palawan plebiscite, let us say a voter would like to vote, he goes now to his precinct, no? Yung kanyang polling center. Doon sa polling center, pagpasok pa lang niya sa gate, kukunin na siya ng kanyang temperature. No? So, doon pa lang, if he registers at 37 degree higher than 37, hindi siya papasukin. No? Pahinga muna siya. And then, kung talagang mataas talaga yung kanyang temperature, dadalhin siya to what is known as the IPP, an isolated polling place. Bagong sistema ito. So lahat ng mga polling centers doon na magkakaroon ng IPP. No? So, bibigyan pa rin yung botante ng right to vote. Yung mga hindi nag-register ng lower temperature will now be allowed to go to their respective precincts. Doon sa respective precincts, we mandated that there would be a maximum of 5 voters per precinct lang at a time. Tapos then nagpagawa kami ng mga polling, what we call these tables doon, covered by what we call this, may mga barriers doon, plastic barriers, para lang hindi magkaroon ng hawaan. Tapos then may yung mga ating mga election officials doon, meron silang gloves na suot, tapos mayroong mga alcohol doon, may spray doon, kompleto yon, no? So we think all of these were very effective, and we hope to include them for the 2022 election. So that would hopefully sana mag-participate yung ating tao dito, give them confidence na sumama sa election na to. Okay, dun sa schedule naman, no? Sa schedule, we're right on schedule right now, no? Naman tayo, we have conducted several biddings already for equipments, for ballots, lahat ng on schedule naman yung ating mga biddings, preparations natin. We have come up already with the calendar of activities already. By October, by the way, we're on our registration period until September 30, no? So I'll take the opportunity to invite everyone, yung hindi pa naka-register, please register. This is your only way to vote. Kung hindi kayo naka-register, hindi kayo makakaboto. So that would be until September 30th. Masarap pakinggan yung binanggit ni Atty. Ople, no, na yung i-register. I-register. Mabuti naman, nag-avail yung ating mga kabataan dito. Sana naman ma-explain to sa mga taong ito. We created this one so that it would be easier for our people to register. Comes October, filing na ng Certificate of Candidacy. So, filing ng Certificate of Candidacy, tinitingnan namin to. Dati kasi, pag nag-file ka ng Certificate of Candidacy, open sa lahat yan, sabay-sabay. We're thinking of, although I'm just giving this as subject of discussion pa ng COMELEC ito, we will just assign several days for several positions. Let us say for presidential and vice presidential and senators, probably 2 days, for local official and another number of days. Hindi sabay-sabay para hindi sila magsabay-sabay sa mga ating election offices, no? So far yun ang ating mga ginagawa. I want to reassure people that COMELEC is on its job. Ginagawa namin lahat para magkaroon ng safe and honest election come 2020. Thank you, Ina.
Sir, sorry, Joyce, if I may be allowed. Sir, yes, yung third question ko about the campaign, how will it be different, of course, in light of the pandemic? And sir, meron ka lang sinabi na I think is very important and worth stressing, that you said the IPP will make sure that the voters, even if mataas ang kanilang temperature but still able naman to vote, are still given an opportunity to vote because it's their right to vote. So ganun din po yung mangyayari, sir, sa 2022. Kahit mataas ang temperatura ko pero willing akong bumoto at kaya ko naman, there will be a designated area for me to vote, sir. Thank you.
Merong ganong klaseng procedure. Hopefully we would adopt that, no, come 2022, no? Okay, let's go to the question, yung campaign. Definitely because of COVID situation, magkakaroon ng changes sa actual campaign. yung mga kampanya wherein the candidates will be there, rallies, etc. Hindi na yan kagaya nung dati. No? Kasi alam mo naman, tinatakutan natin dito yung super spreader events. Campaigns would be spreader events. Kung nakita natin sa India, no, yung recent election sa India, grabe talaga yon, no? I think it contributed to their, spike ng kanilang COVID situation. Now, nabanggit din kanina ni Dr. Ho yung no, yung social media, no? We anticipate because of this COVID situation, yung participation ng social media sa campaign will be talagang gagamitin ito ng mga kandidato, no? But I want to tell everyone na yung ating social media kasi there is still no law that regulates social media in relation to campaign. Kasi this is a fairly recent phenomenon, no? Itong social media campaigning. So, although COMELEC have issued regulations on this just to control, regulate, social media for election. Just if you can give me a few minutes, no, explain ko lang sa inyo yung social media. Yung social media kasi, okay, in a normal situation, in traditional campaigning, ang kandidato dalaw yan pag-advertise, no? He goes to print media and he goes to broadcast media. Sa print media kasi, ang limitation ng control points namin dyan would be yung frequency and size. Let's say, ng posters, etc., etc. May mga limitations yan. No? Sa broadcast naman, saka whether TV or radio, ang control points namin dyan would be yung how much, yung gastos nila. Okay, now, pasok ngayon yung social media. In social media, technically, at the time when these rules came out, it was not considered. So, COMELEC came out with this regulation to consider social media as part of broadcast. So ngayon, may mga rules tayo dyan na if candidates would like to campaign using social media, we will consider them as if it is being broadcast. So ang control points namin dyan would be yung expenses nila on paying this, let us say, bloggers, yung ating mga websites na so malilink yan doon sa what is known as our SOSE, no? Yung statement of expenses nila. So doon namin sila i-control doon sa expenses. So allowed yan, but it would be subject to control. Hindi naman pwedeng lumampas doon sa allowed by law. So I hope I answered your question. Thank you, Ina.
All right. Thank you, Ina. Thank you, Ina, and thank you, Commissioner Ko. Our next reporter to ask is Ms. Tina Panganiban Perez of GMA 7.
Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Ate Tina. Kamusta?
Kamusta? Good morning. My first question for Commissioner Ko. Sorry, I'm wearing a mask because I'm in a public place.
Mukhang favorite ako.
For Commissioner Ko, sir, in the unity statement, nabanggit po yung recommendation ng participate to add 10 billion pesos for the expenses for the elections next year. How much po yung funds allocated for the elections and how much of that is pandemic related, sir?
Yeah, okay. Ganito. Ngayon, magsa-start pa lang yung budget cycle natin sa government, no? So, internally sa COMELEC, pinag-uusapan pa namin yung budget. Definitely, a substantial chunk of the expenses will be allocated for COVID response safety measures. Wala pa kami figures, no, on how much is needed to have a safe, a COVID-proof election. Hopefully, matapos ang aming 3-in-1 conference by the end of the month, we'll come up with already an estimate on how much it will cost us, no? How much we will request DBM. Yung 10 billion expenses, I understand. I'm not really familiar ano naging basis ng 10 million. Probably it's compared to the Palawan plebiscite on a per voter basis, no? Kasi yung Palawan during the Palawan plebiscite, ang gumastos diyan was the local government. No, sila yung nagbigay sa amin ng pera, how much we need to have a COVID-free election, a COVID-proof election sa Palawan. Ang estimate namin for 2022, initial pa lang to, no, subject to discussions pa rin, would be around 800 million to 1 billion. Hindi naman 10 billion because apparently dun sa yung computation natin ng 10 billion, correct me if I'm wrong, no? Sino nag-come up nito, this was based on a per voter basis, no? Per voter ng Palawan compared to the national. Pero kami, we will compute it on a per precinct. Per precinct kami kasi ang expenses naman on a per precinct, hindi man per voter. So this would substantially reduce the expense or the cost to around probably 700 to around 1 billion.
Okay. Sir, for Commissioner Ko and the other panelists, there are pending bills in Congress to allow senior citizens and PWDs to vote early as local absentee voters. What are your thoughts on this po, Commissioner and the other panelists po?
Okay, I'll take mauna na ako, no? Dun sa what do you call this? Ating mga vulnerable sectors. We have in the COMELEC what's known as the VSO, the Vulnerable Sector Office. Okay. Yung ating mga vulnerable sector, these are special groups that we are focused on para lang bigyan sila ng kanilang right to vote, so they can exercise the right to vote. For seniors as well as yung mga persons with disabilities, we have what is known as the emergency polling places. Let us say a senior who wants to vote goes to his precinct. If the precinct is located in second floor or third floor of the school building, let us say, meron tayong emergency polling places sa ground floor for them to vote. No? So, hindi na sila mahihirapan. Another would be the IPs. No? Ating mga IPs, brother IPs natin, meron tayong mga special polling place din for them. No? Meron din tayo what is known as the APC, accessible polling places for the IPs, na locate natin, mag-create tayo ng polling places doon sa lugar nila, specifically. So, they don't have to go to the bayan. No? They have to walk sometimes, no? Kilometers yan, haba-haba niyan. So we create those precincts mismo doon sa lugar nila. Now, doon sa mga pending bills, no? Doon sa mga pending bills, wala pa kaming nakikitang ma-approve soon, no? I think mukhang matagal pang discussion dito. But we encourage them sana, no? Sana, especially for our seniors and to our PWDs para lang makapag-participate na sila. Wala pa kami nakikitang na soon that it will be implemented or approved by Congress.
I think Dean Edna Ko would like to also answer the questions or give her comments on the statements of Commissioner Ko. Dean Edna?
I hope you don't mind from ko to ko. Yung pong 10 billion, actually, that's something very optimistic, if I could say that. Pero actually, that's based on some algorithms that have been drawn from experiences of other countries. Anong factors kinonsider para mas ma-enhance yung resources ng isang COVID-proof election. Isa po yun na general. But yung pong dokumento tungkol sa pag-aaral ng 10 billion will be shared with COMELEC para makita nyo po yung basis nito. No? But the other thing is on the point that if we expect local government units to pitch in on the cost of election, COVID-proof election, baka po may inclination na mapoliticize dahil yung pong local government units will undergo a local election and it can be viewed by voters. Parang magandang propaganda ito, but I think generally on the whole Filipino voters would like to put the procedures and the rules on election in the hands of COMELEC, being a neutral, non-partisan electoral management body. Mas nararapat po siguro yon if with due respect to the COMELEC. And I think gusto natin mag-shine yung COMELEC as really the body that is on top of this rather than politiko po, kasi po sila ang subject ng choices ng tao. So I think that's one that we don't expect sana pitching in contribution para hindi mapolitika. Election is a political exercise, but I mean, we know what we mean by that, no? Yun po yung isang basis niyan. But certainly, sir, proposal po ito, kailangang himayin ng COMELEC pa rin, and we yield to the COMELEC on what may be useful and relevant. Depende po dun sa, ang ganda ng sinabi ni Dr. Beverly Ho. Sa akin ho, design thinking yun eh. How do we design the election? So napakaganda nung sinabi niya, what are the resources that we can put in place? Baka may costs ito. But at the end of the day, sir, it's COMELEC who will have the final say on how much is really necessary. But we're behind you.
Yeah. Short comment lang. Yung sa LGU kasi ng Palawan, under the law that calls for the plebiscite, nakalagay dun sa batas that they will be the ones spending for the plebiscite. So kaya sila nag-provide ng budget for including the in COVID supplies. But for the national election ta 2022, walang participation ng local governments in coming up with how to run the election. So it will always come from the budget from the GAA ng government natin. So we'll push for DBM to provide us with adequate funding so that we have a COVID-proof election.
All right. I think Attorney Ona of Lente would also like to answer the question.
Hi, just to answer the second question of Dina. Kami sa Lente, we welcome bills on the early voting for older person and persons with disabilities. But unfortunately, just like what Commissioner Ko said earlier, given the proximity of our elections next year, hindi na talaga feasible yung early voting for senior citizens and persons with disability. But what we are suggesting and what we have been saying all along from Lent is we need to implement the APP law or the Accessible Polling Place law to ensure accessibility on the part of our persons with disability and senior citizens or older persons. So mas yun. And for the sector to also take advantage of this Accessible Polling Place law, because one of the problem in the implementation of the APP is hindi masyadong tinitake advantage or hindi masyadong nagko-consent ang mga persons with disability natin at mga older persons to be part of the accessible polling place. So we're calling on the sector, on the two sectors as well, to take advantage of this law for them to ensure accessibility and inclusiveness of the elections for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Ona. Anything else, Ate Tina?
That's it, Joyce. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next question is from TV5's Jen Kalimon. Although she is having technical difficulty with her connection, so nagpadala na lang siya ng tanong niya. At ang tanong niya, again, favorite natin ngayon si Commissioner Ko. Para kay Commissioner Ko, sir, do we see the need to extend the voting hours? Kakayanin po ba ng 8 hours na voting time lang, considering na may additional safety protocols to be implemented? At kung i-extend po natin, gaano po kahaba ang extension?
Okay, ganito. Just background, no? Yung 2016 election natin, we have per clustered precinct 800 voters, no? Linilimit namin sa 800 voters per clustered precinct. Come 2019 election, nag-increase tayo to 1,000 per clustered precinct. Ang limitation kasi natin dito is number of our vote counting machines, yung ating VCMs, no? Okay. Now, for 2022 election, we plan to lower it back to 800 per clustered precinct or even lower depending sa availability ng VCMs natin. Okay, anong status ng VCMs natin? Ang VCM natin ngayon, nagamit na to twice, no? Yung what we call this, yung 2016 and 2019. Ngayon, our voting machines will be subjected to refurbishment. No, papaayusin natin so that maging optimum level of performance siya. We don't expect around 97,000 VCMs natin. We don't expect lahat yan okay. No? Some of them, I would presume, it will not be at par. No? So we're looking at the possibility of acquiring additional machines to around, sabi natin, 10,000 units. No? So as of now, ang approximate namin, nakikita na around 800 per clustered precinct. Okay, ito ang effect nito sa election. Definitely because of COVID, earlier sa COMELEC, we were discussing kung ano possibility ng having a one-day election or 2 days election or extending it more, no? But eventually, ang direction ngayon would be 1 day. Okay. However, we will have COMELEC has the power naman under the election laws to extend voting hours. So almost sure na yan na it will be extended. Pag-uusapan pa gaano ka haba yung extension. So yung dating 8-hour probably election, hindi na applicable yan. It will be extended probably up to 10 or even 12. Depende rin naman yan sa, alam mo naman, kawawa din natin mga teachers, no? We have to consider them also. So tingnan natin yung capacity nila on how they can absorb. But eventually, it will be chances are it will be a one-day election but extended period. Probably additional 2 to 3 hours.
So out of the table na, sir, talaga ang 2 days or 3 days?
Kasi ganito, yung 2 days, 3 days, baka kailangan natin kasi ng Congress, approval ng Congress on that. No? We need legislation for that. But so far, walang action from the House nor the Senate to extend it. Marami din nagsasabi na COMELEC can do it on its own because we have the power to administer election. But we cannot, it's a risk too high to take na baka later on, lahat ng plano namin 2 days, 3 days, so suddenly umakyat sa Supreme Court yan. Sinabi ko Supreme Court, hindi pwede. Patay na lahat yan. No? I mean, so we namin ngayon, one-day election, and then subject to our internal powers, we can extend the voting hours.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Our next question will be coming from Rappler's Dwight De Leon. Dwight?
Hello po. For Commissioner ko rin po, good morning po. I'll ask lang po, ano po yung status una nung pilot test po for mail-in voting in February? Kasi sabi po ni Commissioner Casquejo that gagawan daw po ng pilot test for mail-in voting ng COMELEC tsaka ng PhilPost. And also po second po, ano po yung status po ng proposals on hybrid elections? Is that still on the table? Thank you.
Okay, pilot and hybrid, right?
Yes, pilot test po for mail-in voting, and also ano po yung status ng hybrid elections proposals?
Okay, yung mail-in voting, no? Okay, meron na tayong mail-in voting. We have mail-in voting, but hindi yan dito sa ating lugar, sa Pilipinas. Ang mail-in voting natin, yung ating mga kababayan sa abroad, when they vote, one of the methods for voting is mail-in. No? Okay. Dito sa Pilipinas, wala pa tayong mail-in voting. It needs congressional approval, a law, to implement mail-in voting. At I don't know if we have sufficient time to implement this. No? I'm not really familiar kung ano na yung status ng yung pilot project, no? Kung meron na nangyari ito sa mail-in voting. But whether or not this will be implemented come 2022, highly unlikely na ito. Okay. Number 2, dun sa hybrid election, I understand may movement in the Senate for a hybrid election. Kami naman sa COMELEC, we respect the decision of our national leaders whether they want a hybrid election or not. But we just wait for them, no? We have submitted our comments already, basically supporting what Congress will implement. Ang sa amin lang dito sa hybrid election is a timing issue, no? Assuming gusto ng Congress, whether the Senate and the House, and eventually the executive, to implement hybrid election, nakikita namin ngayon baka hindi na kaya i-implement come 2022. Because pag hybrid, iba naman yung manner of election, will start probably from zero again, and then trainings, acquisition equipment, etc. Baka hindi na kaya. What we ask Congress is that in case the hybrid election law will be passed, magkaroon ng provision dun sa law itself na bigyan ng discretion ng COMELEC to implement the hybrid election come 2025. So by then, we'll be ready, probably by the new commissioners who will be appointed in COMELEC by then, will be ready to implement the hybrid election.
Thank you po, Commissioner. Maybe ano lang po, maybe Sir Eric po of NAMFREL would also like to comment since I know po parang NAMFREL supported hybrid elections proposals in the past.
Yes, good morning, Dwight. Yes, it's still in Congress's hands. No, they have not deliberated further the amendments, to the initial bill that was filed. No? But I think they've already taken in the past comments that we've made in the technical working group. No? I think even the House already has filed their own version, and the last hearing was around March. No? But we're waiting for a final hearing from both chambers, no, to come out with their joint version. True, no, that there's difficulty in implementing a hybrid election, especially for 2022, because there will be adjustments. But I think it's still possible because the version that we're pushing for right now is, in fact, the version that is being recommended by Commissioner Casquejo. You don't necessarily have to discard the BCM machines. No? What we are introducing are certain standards for transparency of the process, and at the same time also for an independent validation of the election results. And these recommendations will be, well, has been submitted already to the COMELEC Advisory Council and also to the COMELEC SteerCom for consideration. If their comments are favorable, then I think we would see just a slight change, no, in how we would still cast the votes similarly, but it's in how we appreciate. It's at the back end that we will see some changes, no, to consider that hybrid or alternative AES. No? Essentially, it's really for transparency purposes.
Thank you po. Thank you po. Thank you din, Commissioner.
Thanks, Dwight, and thanks, Sir Eric. May mga questions din tayong pumapasok mula sa mga nanonood sa atin sa Facebook Live at dito sa mga participants natin sa kapihan natin dito sa Zoom. So, babasahin ko ibang mga tanong sa kanila. First, I would like to address the question to Dr. Beverly Ho. Doc Beverly?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Joyce.
Yes, ma'am, one of the apprehensions, in terms of registration, ang sabi ng mga kababayan natin, isa daw sa mga apprehensions sila is yung safety. Ligtas bang lumabas para magparehistro? Lalo naman patuloy daw pong tumataas yung bilang ng mga nagkakasakit. Do you have tips po sa mga kababayan natin on how to ensure na they will be safe pag lumabas po sila para nagparehistro?
I think alam natin, no, na iba't iba din yung mga lugar na pupuntahan natin for registration. So it's important for us to do the necessary preparation. Kung kailangan nating tawagan yung lugar, ano ba, pwede bang may schedule, gaano ba karami yung tao na pumupunta sa araw na yun, di ba? Because those are things that you cannot control anymore. And you want to be able to do that. So kung alam mo na 8 to 5 lang sila bukas at sinasabi niya 8:00 wala pang masyadong tao, then you'll have to go earlier and not mix with other people, di ba? Second is on the way to the actual registration site. And this is with regard to gaano ka-safe, no? Yung public transport na iti-take mo, basikip ba siya, etc. Di ba? Considering na may surge tayo ngayon. And then third would be all the related PPEs that you will need and the behavior that you have to undertake, which alam na natin yun, no? We have to wear our mask, face shield, physical distance, and really not go into crowds. Other than that, I think alam na natin siya. Kailangan lang natin siya to be able to practice, and as much as possible, lessen yung mga hindi mo kayang makontrol na situation. And that will be really dependent on the area where you register. Thank
minimum,
you, Joyce.
Opo, minimum health standard pa rin po, no? And syempre kahit na nabakunahan na, kailangan sundin pa rin natin, di ba, ang minimum health standards po. Ma'am, opo, napag-usapan din po kasi yung budget kanina. Sa side po ng health sector, in conducting big events like the elections, ano po ba yung mga non-negotiables na dapat talagang pagkagastusan to ensure that the 2022 elections will be safe?
So sa amin naman, no, is what we do is advise. So for example, what happened during the Palawan plebiscite, they sought also our technical advice on what needs to be put into the guidelines, but we didn't really work out the budget with them, no. So I think that's better answered by the administrators. But from our end, as what we've mentioned, the choice, no, of the place, because ventilation is increasingly important now, is going to be critical. And then second, the engineering and administrative controls. It's not even just the PPEs, no, but making sure that people don't actually crowd, that's going to be critical. And syempre, minsan yung hindi natin nakikita na cost, no? Kasi ngayon, klaro na cost is yung PPE ng lahat ng staff, yung mga acrylic na plastics, etc. Diba? Pero yung hindi din natin nakikita na cost is yung cost ng preparation, no? Which is na make sure ba natin na yung mga tao who are administering, who are enforcing, they're also all safe, no? And taken care of during the day na hirap din sila because they're all nakabalot at nainitan. So those are really just some of the few points from our end. Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you, Doc Beverly. And next may question din po para kay Coco Alcoaz ng MPC, sir. Apo. Sir, sinabi po earlier na what else should be done, sir, to boost the confidence of Filipino voters? Kasi binanggit nyo rin daw po kanina, sir, na meron po kayong mga campaigns para to encourage people to register, voters education and awareness campaigns. What do you think, sir, should be done para po mapataas natin yung kumpiyansa ng mga kababayan natin para bumoto?
Thanks. Thank you very much, Joyce. I'll answer that two ways. There's some things that the business sector can do. As Doc Bev and some of the people in this webinar know, the business sector is trying its best to help the government in vaccination, as it did with getting testing equipment and the like before it. Vaccination in terms of buying vaccines, and then also in terms of vaccine administration. So the private sector will do that in many different ways, like I said, as individuals, as companies, as associations, and as loose groups as well within the business sector. But as with the whole pandemic, it's similar with the election. It's really the government, and in this case, Commissioner Ko, it's really the government, and in this case, the COMELEC, that can do obviously the most. And just, I don't want to insert myself into the question between Dean Edna and Commissioner Ko, because if you write that paragraph, it will be Dean Ko, Commissioner Ko, and Coco all commenting at the same time. But to the point about the 10 billion peso request, there are many uses for that money. I don't want to pretend to be the expert here. Dean Ron, Dean Edna, Eric know this much more than I do, but I did a little bit of homework last night for the reporters here who might be as unfamiliar with this data as I was a couple of days ago. If you look at the Indonesia situation, they took steps to limit the number of voters per precinct to 500. They put hourly limits. They put schedules and slots. They put safety and sanitary measures, which means testing. And we've talked about this, and commissioners talked about this. Testing even for the poll workers, hand washing stations, sanitizers, and the like. There's a lot of online measures and interventions that can be put in place, although that's sometimes a double-edged sword, as we've seen with vaccine administration. Some people have a hard time with the online part. All of that costs a lot of money. In Indonesia, if I'm, and Dean Ron and Eric and Dean Edna, please correct me if I'm wrong, Indonesia spent $470 million to make their election COVID safe. And that calculates to about 17 billion pesos. That gives you the context, that gives you a context rather, for the 10 billion that the group is proposing here. I think this is very important because you need to communicate to the people that they will be safe when they register and when they vote. The last thing we want is to have any fear, is to have any unnecessary fear that we could have countered, lowering the voter turnout. As I said earlier, there are ways to safely reopen the economy, and there are definitely ways to have a safe, free, and fair election, Joyce.
All right. Thank you very much, Coco. Now, Unfortunately, we don't have much time left. So very quickly, I would like to call on our panelists one by one. Baka po meron kayong huling gustong sabihing mensahe. Doc Beverly.
Thank you, Joyce. From the health side, we all need to be part of the solution, and that means we all need to do our part in prevention, diba? So kayang-kaya natin to, nagawa natin siya before, and we can always do it now. And second is that this has also, the election has implications on your health, no? Not just because of the election day activities, but the people that we vote, how the governance of the country will be spelled out after the election. So it is very important for all us as citizens to also make sure that the election will be successful and healthy for all of us. So maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Doc Bev. And maybe call on next Dean Edna. Last words po. All right, do we have Dean Edna? Sige, while waiting for Dean Edna, perhaps we can have Sir Eric.
Okay, yeah. Three things, no? For our voters. So make sure that as early as now, we have already checked if we are really registered as voters. And as early as now, if we haven't registered yet, let's not meet the mad rush for the deadlines, no, from September 30. As soon as the lockdowns have been lifted, probably should pay attention to this and register ourselves. And also find out where the location of our voting centers are. Second, we are 1 year before the elections. Know the issues, know the election issues, know the issues that are close to your community, and also national issues, no, which are going to bear on deciding for the next leaders, no, come 2022. Third, know your candidates also, no, because some of them already have intimated their desire to run for local or national public office. Then as early as now also, check them out. No? Find out who they are, find out their capabilities, find out really if their desire to run for public office is really sincere or not. And they have the capability to deliver. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sir Eric. How about Attorney Ona of Lente? Meron pa po kayong gustong mensahe?
Yes, for voters to go out in May 2022, they should be able to say sa atin ng election. And what does sa atin ng election stand for? It means safe, and the safety of voters of all stakeholders depend on the protocols, measures that COMELEC will be implementing for elections next year. And it's imperative on the part of COMELEC to make these protocols as inclusive as possible. What do I mean when I say inclusive? Dapat it should be consulted with traditional election organizations, but as well as non-traditional election organizations, just like the health sector. Kaya nakakatawa na nandito si Dr. Ho. And lastly, we should also make these protocols transparent. What do I mean when I say transparent? These measures are new in our elections, and this will be the first time voters will be seeing these measures. And as early as possible, I'm really happy to hear Commissioner Ko say na meron silang 3-in-1 conference. Na sana after that conference, they'll be embarking on a massive information dissemination, because people really need to know these new measures, so that they will be confident that they will be able to go out in the elections next year, and that will be able to say sa atin ng election. Thank you,
Alright.
Joyce.
Thanks, Attorney Ona. Then maybe call on Dean Edna. Baka po meron kayong closing statement.
Actually, Joyce, I think nag-resonate na yung mga iba-ibang messages, no? But I think from my own discipline, public administration, I would like to say that at the end of the day, there is so much to be entrusted, to be hoped for on what administrators of election can do. And this is where we put our support behind the Commission on Election. And secondly, the second point is this pandemic challenges us to look more into the science of a political exercise. Ang ibig sabihin, yung siyensya ng kalusugan, ng pag-iwas sa sakit, ng safety, and that requires a lot lot of logic, a lot of designing, but at the end of the day, a lot of compassion and respect for the right of people to vote and to have access to the choice of leaders. So ito po ay hindi lang political exercise. This is also an exercise on how we integrate science into what is supposed to be a very political decision-making activity. Maraming salamat.
All right, thank you, Dean Edna. Now may we call on Attorney Mildred for the youth sector.
Thank you, Joyce. So hindi ko na i-reiterate yung mga nabanggit na, but siguro isa lang, sa lahat ng mga kabataan, based sa PSA, yung 18 to 35 years old is 40 million eligible voters for the 2022 elections. So your one vote matter dahil may bilang ito, mahalaga ito, at kabilang ka sa mga kabataan na boboto ngayong eleksyon because you will benefit from good governance or you will suffer from poor governance. So take ownership of the future and participate. Let us help out COMELEC in information dissemination to increase the confidence of our fellow Filipinos to vote for the May 2022 elections. So kabilang po tayo mga kabataan sa election.
All right, thank you, Attorney Dred. And maybe call on Coco Alcoaz, please, from the private sector, from the business sector, sir.
Thanks again, Joyce. I'd just like to thank especially Commissioner Ko for his participation here today and for heading a new normal committee. It's very gratifying for me. I did not realize that for us to learn that there's such an initiative in the COMELEC. Thank you very much to him. We hope the COMELEC gets 10 times more money than he's asking for. We feel there's a need for it. I just like to end by saying that we all know that there is Dean Ron started by talking about pandemic and polarization, and we all know how polarized our times are around the world and how divisive and divided our politics all are. I hope that we can all pitch in, whether it's private sector and the government and different parts of the private sector, to pitch in and make the election a source of unity. Earlier, it was said that, Doc Bev said, we have no choice but to be optimistic. I think in a similar vein, we have no choice or the best choice is to try to use this election as a means to get back the unity that is lacking in many places around the world today, Joyce. And thank you very much for this opportunity and for organizing this, everybody.
And thank you for joining us also. And of course, last but definitely not the least, maybe call on Commissioner Ko for your final words, sir.
Yes, thank you. Salamat sa Ateneo School of Government for organizing this kapihan. Sana magkaroon pa tayo ng ganitong kapihan, no? At mahabang oras para we can discuss more. Hopefully, this would be a continuing thing, a regular thing, no? Now, just to address again the 10 billion budget, alam mo, nagpapasalamat ng COMELEC na yung ating mga cost-oriented groups, yung ating mga NGOs came up with this figure. I hope we can have an extended discussion on this so that in our 3-in-1 conference, we can make this as an input so that when we come up with a budget, because I think we have to submit our budget to DBM by June or July for the President to present this in Congress sana by the SONA, no? So hopefully we can, alam naman mas maraming pera, mas no? It would be better for us, no? Hopefully. Now, I just want to add something na hindi nabanggit kanina, no? In social media, yung effect ng social media sa ating campaign. Presently, ang COMELEC, because we're coming up with a discussion pa lang naman to, coming up with a website wherein people can access and see kung sino yung mga kandidato natin. Kasi ngayon, di ba, ang mangyayari dyan sa website, sa social media, let us say, a candidate who's running, magpo-post yan ng mga whatever sa kanilang sa sarili ng website. Medyo mahal yan. We expect na magkakaroon ng cost yan. So COMELEC is coming up with a website that would include probably national positions muna. Let us say candidate for the president, candidate A. So candidate A will be allowed to post his, let us say, platform of government doon, etc., etc. Probably a short talk, 1 minute or 30-second video na magsalita siya, so that ang ating mga tao can go to that, no? So that meron tayong isang website managed by COMELEC that will allow our citizen to access, no, yung mga kandidato, yung kanilang platform of government, what they yung mga issues of the day, ano stand nila. So we're hoping that it will be adopted come 2022. So hintayin niyo yon. It's a good project. I hope it will be implemented. So thank you everyone. Thank you sa lahat ng participants. Masarap kayong kausap, masaya kayong kausap. So sana magkaroon pa tayo ng ganitong klaseng usapan. Salamat, Joyce.
And marami rin kaming natutunan sa inyo today, Commissioner. So salamat din po sa pagpapa-unlock sa imbitasyon namin. So before we end our Kapihan, may inihanda kaming maikling video para sumahin or isummarize ang panawagan ng libo-libo sa ating mga kababayan nga na i-COVID-proof ang eleksyon. Itong ipapakita naming video ay batay sa naging unity statement ng participate. At sinuportahan ng, gaya nga ng sabi namin, may 2,000 groups mula sa iba't ibang sektor. Panoorin natin to.
Ilang buwan na lang, eleksyon na naman. Pero dumarami pa rin mga nagkaka-COVID.
More than 1 million COVID-19 cases. Ang 26 na bansa sa mundo na nakapagtala ng higit 1 milyong
Dahil
kaso.
ang kalahating milyong kaso ay lahat na itala sa unang 4 na buwan ng 2021.
Takot kang lumabas. Tingin mo hindi safe magparehistro. Kinakabahan kang bumoto. Don't worry, hindi ka nag-iisa. Pero, hindi ba mas nakakatakot kung hindi ka makakaboto? 6 na taon din kasi yun ang buhay mo kapag sablay ang mananalo. Nagdadalawang isip ka dahil sa COVID? Valid concern. Pero may solusyon. Alam mo bang pwedeng-pwede ang safe na eleksyon kahit na may pandemya? Gaya ng ginawa sa US, Singapore at Indonesia. Kailangan lang siguraduhin na COVID-proof o ligtas, patas at malaya ang eleksyon ngayong new normal. Paano? Una, ayon sa pag-aaral ng Project Participate, kailangan dagdagan ng 10 billion pesos ang budget para maging COVID-proof ang eleksyon. Base ito sa ginastos noong 2019 elections at sa ginawang Palawan plebiscite nitong Marso. Oo, nagkaroon ng eleksyon sa Palawan habang may pandemic. Pangalawa, kailangan talaga ng istriktong pagpapatupad ng health and safety protocols at ng mga election rules. Bawal na bawal pa rin ang vote buying dahil kahit gaano kahirap ang buhay ngayon, wala pa rin katumbas na halaga ang boto mo. Pangatlo, dapat may intense information campaign. Kailangan updated tayo sa paghahanda na ginagawa ng gobyerno. Asahan nyo rin, pati sa kampanya, may new normal. Pero dapat, siguraduhin pa rin na patas sa lahat ito at transparent sa gastusin. Para maging super successful ang eleksyon, dapat tulong-tulong tayong lahat. Yung mga nasa gobyerno, yung mga masisipag mag-research, yung mga woke, kahit yung mga TikTokers. Makialam at sumuporta sa gobyerno para siguraduhin na COVID-proof ang eleksyon. Oh, di ba? Kung gusto, may paraan. Ano pang hinihintay mo? Magparehistro ka na. Dahil habang ginagawa ng gobyerno ang obligasyon nito, dapat ikaw, ako, tayo rin. Makiisa para sa bayan.
Ayan, and before we let our panelists go, and pati mga kaibigan natin sa media at ang mga guests natin, may we request for a quick photo opportunity with everyone, please? Ayan, ito na kasi ang ito na ang new normal sa mga sa mga press conference po. Meron tayong picture taking pero virtual pa rin. Ayan. Nakita natin ang isa't isa. Alright. Ready? Ayan. Are we good? Pwede na tayong mag-smile? Ayan. Alright. Inihintay ko lang po yung cue ng tech team natin.
Alright, Joyce, kindly count 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 panels, please. Thank you.
Alright. 3 times? Okay, tatlong daw po. Tatlong poses. Alright. 1, 2, 3. Alright, again, let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. And last one po. Alright, Sam, ready?
Yep.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Again, that was Kapihan sa ASoG Ligtas Halalan 2022. Sana po marami kayong natutunan sa araw na to. At again, sa panelists po natin at sa mga guests, maraming salamat po sa pagsama sa amin ngayong araw na ito. Muli, para sa mga gustong pumirma ng Unity Statement, matatagpuan ito sa website at Facebook page ng Participate. So, hanapin lang sa Facebook ang Participate. At paalala rin, tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang voters registration. So wag natin palalampasin ito. Yung mga hindi pa nakakapagparehistro, magparehistro na tayo. Dahil sabi nga natin sa video kanina, habang ginagawa ng gobyerno ang kanilang tungkulin, dapat ikaw, ako, tayo rin ginagawa natin ang tungkulin natin bilang Pilipino. So maraming salamat po at mag-ingat po tayong lahat. Thanks po ulit. Salamat po.
Ingat po.
Everybody, thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner po.
Thank
you po.
Maraming salamat po. Yan ang Kapihan sa ASoG.
Thank you, everyone. God bless.
Right. May mga comments. Thank you sa mga nag-iiwan ng humahabol ng messages sa chat box. Thank you po for attending our webinar. Salamat po.